All right. Hey, my friends, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about OCD, anxiety, and guilt. And so, guilt is a very common emotion that is experienced along with things like OCD and anxiety. And so, in this episode specifically, I want to kind of focus on that emotion and offer some ideas and perspectives that will hopefully help you lift out of guilt if that's something that you are struggling with. So, before we dive into the show, if you could help us out by liking and subscribing, as well as leaving a nice comment or review on iTunes and Spotify, I would really appreciate it, as it helps the algorithm of the show, helps us get this information to more people that need it. And then also, if you're looking for help on your journey with OCD and anxiety to recovery, please check out the links in the notes. You can also head over to Restored Minds, and we have the resources there to help guide you in that direction and take you to the next step. So just go ahead and check those out when you're ready. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about guilt because I think it's a very common emotion that holds people back in life. And a lot of times when we experience guilt, we often question why it's there, right? And then we mistakenly often the sense because its presence there that we then identify with the emotion as we did something wrong, or we are wrong, we are bad because we experience guilt. And a lot of times we can experience, so the first thing is to understand that a lot of times we can experience guilt out of a false belief, especially if you're experiencing prolonged guilt. You're definitely most likely holding on to false beliefs that are perpetuating that guilt. So let's go ahead and start with the idea that, there is such thing as healthy guilt, right? People who never experience guilt are called psychopaths. And the reason they don't have a conscience, so they don't feel bad about hurting people, wronging people, stealing from people, and they will just perpetuate that again and again and again and again and again, without any course correction or change. And if they get in trouble, what they're usually try to do is how to navigate not getting in trouble, just because that benefits them, not because it hurts someone else. So for the overwhelming majority of us, though, we'll experience guilt when something happens that maybe we wronged someone or even did something wrong inadvertently. Let's say I was walking and I was distracted looking at my phone or something, and I tripped someone on accident, right? Bumped into someone, they fell down, right? I might feel a level of guilt, even shame, because, I inadvertently may have hurt someone. This is a hypothetical story, of course, but, and so with that guilt, what that allows me to do is to, one, correct the action, help the person up, make it right if I need to. If something broke, replace it. And then, more importantly, course correct from there. Like, I need to walk more aware. I need to walk more alert. I need to be able to, not get so distracted or not be distracted so I don't cause harm to people. That guilt allows for that course correction in life. But what isn't helpful is if I maintain that guilt of like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I was so stupid, man. It's like, just always making mistakes, right? And then harboring on that to the point where I just feel guilty all the time. So a healthy level of guilt allows for a course correction, okay? And this is really true of, most of our lower emotions. Like and I say lower emotions when I'm referring to the emotions, I'm oftentimes referencing like Dr. David Hawkins' scale in his book, The Map of Consciousness, right? So all the way from 0 to 1,000. And then interestingly enough, there's a book called The Levels of Energy that, almost correlates the same exact scale from a completely different author. And there's a lot of this, lot of these that have come up, and it's really interesting how they come to very similar conclusions on that. But really, the idea of a consciousness level or an energy level. So, what Hawkins says, and I'm going to read a couple quotes here on this episode because, I've been reading the book, The Map of Consciousness, so I wanted to kind of draw from it on these episodes here. But he says, resisting a negative emotion keeps you stuck. And if you're willing to let go of the negative emotion, you get freer and move up the scale, eventually experiencing predominantly positive feelings. So again, it's our unwillingness to experience emotions that actually keeps us stuck in them. And we talk about this, what you resist persists, right? I mean, it's like you've heard this again and again. And it's so important that we understand this because it's true. And then he goes on to say, in the emotions such as fear, guilt, shame, anger, even things like desire, what he talks about in his book, Power versus Force, is these are emotions that are associated with force, right? And, and anything above that, starting with courage up, are, higher emotions with power. And, he says all lower emotions are limitations and blind us to the reality of our true self. And I think this is so true with guilt, especially because guilt comes from this idea that I should have been different, that I should not have made that mistake. And if we maintain, and then that is obviously predicated on the idea that I shouldn't make mistakes if for some reason I'm infallible. I as a human, I'm not supposed to make mistakes, even though we know that's literally impossible for all humans, right? Like everyone has made a mistake. There's not one person I haven't talked to that doesn't have good, decent regret from their past, and that's okay because that's part of being human, right? Guilt often comes from this belief that for some reason that shouldn't apply to you. Or if you made a mistake, it somehow was worse than other people's mistakes, or that, you should be held to a higher standard than others. And there's a quote here that I'm going to read. And I just thought it was so good, because it's such a powerful thing in releasing guilt, right? Because one of the ways we release guilt is, yes, we need to feel guilt, but also we need to let go of the beliefs that are driving it. Meaning we need to anchor into different beliefs that would allow us to have a different perspective of the situation, oftentimes allowing us to then feel the guilt and release it. So we have to, in many ways, kind of shift the paradigm or the belief underneath the guilt itself. So the quote reads, and this is from the book of A Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins. So I'm going to read the quote here. The quote reads, "A benign view of yourself is an important step, as it affirms the truth that you're doing the best you can. In fact, every human from moment to moment is always doing the best they can. Nothing else is possible except a hypothetical, idea, so to speak." And you're like, well, am I always doing the best I can, right? Because oftentimes, if we're honest, we make mistakes, right? We knowingly do things when they're wrong, right? So are we always doing the best we can? And this would be the challenge that would most often come up with this statement. And the reality is it was the best you can because that's what happened. There's no other real way to say it. And at the end of the day, when you are factoring in your belief structures, your perceptions, your emotions in that situation, what you did, whatever it is that you feel guilty about, was the best that you could do because it's literally what happened, right? And when you made a mistake, oftentimes it was that mistake and even the consequences of that mistake that allowed you to then see things differently, to shift, to change. And since we're always working and life is constantly giving us ways in which we can grow and evolve ourselves into better humans, if we're really looking for it anyway, then our mistakes in our past that we feel guilty about are things that we can let go of, knowing that needed to happen for me to, I needed to make that mistake so I could learn what I needed to learn from it. And if you're able to come at it from that perspective, you can begin to release the guilt, saying, and literally like forgiving that past version of yourself for whatever happened. And this isn't a license to go do terrible things, right? I mean, what we're saying here is like, it's like we're able to forgive ourselves or other people even, ideally, even especially other people, so that we can be emotionally free, meaning we can live from a higher state. the reality is if you're operating from these lower emotions like guilt, like shame, regardless what it's about, whether it's about, well, I shouldn't have them because I have intrusive thoughts. I feel guilty about wrestling with my mental health. I feel like I'm not a good parent. I feel like I'm not a good spouse. I feel like, all this stuff, right? This jargon that's going on that's perpetuating these feelings of guilt. What you can begin to do is say, okay, like I'm able to feel the guilt and move into a higher state instead of I need to resolve what my mind's saying or resolve the emotion itself. Because when we go that route, oftentimes it just perpetuates it and makes it worse. So I thought this was a great quote from the book, and I wanted to share it on the episode today because I find that guilt is this weight that people carry. And I know I've carried it for sure. But it's fruitless. It's not doing anything for you. Right? And it's absolutely not doing anything for everyone else in your life that depends on you. And once you can realize that you are human and that you do make mistakes, and you can start to anchor into truths that are higher than the lies that you're believing that are perpetuating the guilt, once you begin to shift those, like really understanding that like you've always done your best, and that's enough, and that the mistakes that we make serve for us to learn. Like that's the only way that we learn in life is mistakes. And so being able to let go of guilt and course correct is a big part of growth as individuals. Maintaining the beliefs that you should be perfect, or you shouldn't make mistakes, or these things shouldn't have happened, or you shouldn't have done this, is not doing anything for you. Just straight up. It's not helping you in any way. In fact, all it's getting you to really do is resist the emotion, which is perpetuating it, which is keeping you stuck in a state of suffering. And that's absolutely not helping you reach your full potential and ultimately being of service to others that are in your life that need you. So with that said, I wanted to share that today. I wanted to share those thoughts on guilt today, with the hope that if it's something that you're carrying, or someone you know that someone is carrying, that we can begin to let that go, move into higher states, for everyone's benefit. So hope that helps. Wish you guys a great week as always, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Hey there. So if you enjoyed that video, we've linked up a few more videos that we think you'd find helpful as well. And if you have found this helpful, we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for help and guidance, please check out restoredminds.com, as we have several options for you to get started. See you guys soon.